This is Unit 13, Ophthalmic and Dermatologic Agents. Your course objectives or your unit objectives are listed here as usual, and along with the associated chapter readings to associate this information to. And then also know that there is a PowerPoint lecture as well that is associated with this, and mainly it's just a bunch of slides with some of the graphics that goes over the anatomy and physiology. Please make sure to have that PowerPoint slide available to you or next to you, so that way you can kind of flip back and forth between the lecture content and the slides to help hardwire some of that information. The graphics can be helpful. So review anatomy and physiology. I'm going to go ahead and flip to your PowerPoint slide and then just follow along in that manner. So anatomy and physiology. Anatomy speaking, we know that the eye is a sensory organ. It converts patterns of light to nerve impulses that are actually sent to the brain, and then the brain interprets those impulses and makes some type of meaningful or meaning of that visual input. Further looking at the anatomy of the eye, we have the sclera. The sclera is a very tough, it's a white coat of fibrous tissue that surrounds the entire eyeball except for the cornea. And it helps maintain the shape of the eye, and quite commonly we're going to refer to that as the white of the eye, or you will hear it referred to as that. We also have the musculature of the eye, and this is actually one of the photos here is actually from your textbook. And so the musculature of the eye is basically held in place by 6 muscles, and they are controlled by cranial nerves. So you can see the different muscles that actually hold that eye in place and allow for movement. Going back, when we are looking at the eyelid, the eyelids are movable. They can open or close, and they help protect the eye when they're closed. And then when they're open, it allows for vision to occur. We also have what's called the conjunctiva. And the conjunctiva is a very clear mucous membrane. It lines the inner portion of the eyelid and also covers the exposed anterior surface of the eyeball. Anterior is the front of the eye, okay? Anterior surface of the eyeball, and it aids in providing lubrication. Okay, so internal structure of the eye. So we have the cornea, and the cornea is the very transparent anterior portion of the eye, and that it sits in front of the lens, and it basically acts as the eye's most outer lens, okay? It functions like a window that controls and focuses the entry of light. There is no blood supply to the cornea, but it receives its nourishment from tears and then aqueous humor, okay? So we also have the anterior chamber. That's basically that bubble-like portion of the front of the eye that is between the iris and the cornea. So here you have the cornea, and then here you have the iris, okay? The lens is transparent. It's that transparent curved structure of the eye, and it is actually located behind the iris and the pupil. So this is your lens right here, okay? Let me get rid of some of these markings. So it's located behind the iris and the pupil, and along with the cornea, it helps to refract light to be focused by the retina. And then you have the iris, and the iris, so this is your iris here, okay? Let me take that marking away. So the iris is basically this round muscular portion of the eye, and it gives the eye its color, and it also controls the amount of light that passes through the pupil. How does it do that? It's a very, you think of it as like a muscular curtain. So it can actually constrict or dilate. So that's the manner in which it controls the amount of light that passes through the pupil. Okay, so it constricts or dilates. You have the posterior chamber and cavity, right? That's the back portion of the eye, posterior chamber, and it's filled with a watery fluid known as vitreous humor. So aqueous passes into that posterior chamber, and then it flows forward through the pupil into the anterior chamber of the eye, okay? So this is our vitreous humor that's in the back of the eye right here. See, this is the line you have here. This is all vitreous humor, right? And then it's going to flow outward and drain forward through the pupil into that anterior chamber of the eye. So we have the optic nerve. The optic nerve is a major nerve that connects the posterior end of each eye to the brain, to which it transmits visual signals. And this aids in interpreting incoming visual stimuli. And then you have the retina. That is the innermost layer of the eye. It contains both rods, black and white vision, and cones, which is color vision. Okay, so your rods are responsible for that black and white vision. Cones are responsible for color vision. So it receives that visual stimuli, and that basically transmits them to the optic nerve. And then we also have the central retinal artery and vein. The artery carries blood into the eye and supplies nutrition to the retina. And then the vein carries blood out of the retina. So this is all just some basic A&P, just to remind you. Hopefully all of this is review though. Okay, so physiology speaking, so now we're on fluid. So we have blood flow, and that blood flow, some of this is going to be a little bit of reiteration of what was already mentioned. So we have blood flow through that central artery and vein that carries blood into the eye and supplies nutrition to the retina and carries blood away from the retina. So we also have the vitreous humor. We already kind of talked about that. That's the fluid that actually fills the posterior chamber of the eye. And then your aqueous humor is the fluid that fills the anterior chamber of the eye. And both of those actually contribute to intraocular pressure. That is the pressure that is within the eye. We also have our tears or lacrimal glands. Let me just flip here really quick. So we have these lacrimal glands, and they're glands that are located at the medial corner of the eyelids that produce tears. And we also have ducts, and we have what's called nasal lacrimal ducts. And these are the small tubes that actually drain the tears from the lacrimal glands into the nasal cavity. Okay, so this is why, and we're going to go over eye drops and how to properly instill eye drops. And this is why we actually, as one of the steps in inserting eye drops, we actually take our finger, or we tell our patient, instruct them to take their finger if they're doing eye drops at home, and we apply pressure to the corner of the eye here after we instill those eye drops. So why do we do that? This aids in preventing systemic absorption of the drug. So the drug therefore stays within the eye and doesn't drain into that nasal lacrimal duct. Okay, we want it to stay in the eye and do its job here and not drain through this duct here. So that's why we should be actually applying pressure to the eye whenever we give eye drops after we administer them. So for vision, go back here. We already talked about rods. Rods is your black and white and peripheral vision. And then the cones are your color and straight ahead vision. So that's what those are responsible for. Muscle movement we've already looked at. We already looked at the figure. That's actually on page 881 if you wanted to review it. But just remember again, the eye is held in place by those 6 muscles, and they're controlled by the cranial nerves. And then our nervous system. Our nervous system, our nervous tissue in the retina is connected to the brain through the optic nerve.